All right, everyone, welcome to the DSP webinar all about DSP, Ultimate Upper Funnel Tool. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we begin and give our introductions to Doug and Catherine, I have a few housekeeping items that we want to mention. We will be answering questions at the end of this webinar and throughout in the chat. So please submit questions in the Q&A. You can see it at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be answering all of those questions. This webinar will also be recorded and will be shared with you within 24 hours within the conclusion of the webinar. You will also be able to find a recording of the webinar on our website, feedvisor.com, under our resources section. One more thing, we would appreciate your participation in a short poll we have at the end. It will be covering overall satisfaction of the webinar, as well as getting your insight into potential DSP topics in the future or other topics for other webinars. Now, before we begin, let me introduce Feedvisor, our speakers, as well as myself. I am your host, Rachel Van Klepper. I am the content marketing writer here at Feedvisor, and it is my pleasure to introduce our two speakers, first of which is Doug Kaplan. Prior to joining Feedvisor, Doug worked for Amazon for almost 8 years, where he helped in the creation of Amazon DSP, so very fitting, as well as launch of Amazon's global programmatic platform. He also worked in Samsung Ads and Walmart Connect throughout his 14-year career in advertising, in online advertising specifically. Next up is Catherine. Catherine has worked in the digital advertising industry for 4 years, 3 of which has been spent solely on as a campaign manager, working on various DSP campaigns. She is an expert in Amazon advertising and DSP campaign creation, management, and optimization. And before I hand it over to our main speakers today, I would love to tell you a little bit more about Feedvisor. At Feedvisor, we help brands and retailers outperform their competition and win on Amazon. And marketplaces are pretty complex to navigate and highly competitive, more so now than ever before. At Feedvisor, we help by holistically optimizing your business with best-in-class AI technology, predictive business intelligence, and deep Amazon expertise across advertising, pricing, and content. And as a result of our vast proprietary data, we also have a unique pulse into marketplaces across every category, as well as search and competitive landscape for our clients. So without further ado, Doug, I'm going to pass it on over to you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Rachel. We're really excited to dig into this presentation that's just really all about the DSP. So the DSP, I'm sure people have heard about it. It's a pretty big buzzword in e-commerce and advertising, but most people don't actually know what the DSP is and how you can begin utilizing it for your strategies in advertising. So marketplace sellers, they're more abundant than ever, which means there's just much more competition, a lot of competition. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. There's over 5 million sellers on Amazon alone, and it takes a significant amount of dollars for your products and ads to reach your customers, let alone convert. So because of this, we've all seen ad offerings evolving to include much more upper funnel options, which is where the DSP lives. So you're starting to see shifts from more performance-based tactics to brand building strategies. So these include awareness-driven formats like digital display and video, which is becoming a much bigger part of your advertising component. And these are all leveraged to reach in-market consumers you can't reach on Amazon search or other sponsored ad platforms or lower funnel advertising efforts that Amazon offers. But as upper funnel ads continue to grow in importance, we need to explain how you're going to begin incorporating the DSP into your advertising strategies to meet your goals.
Awesome. So I just wanted to go through the agenda. So today we'll be covering 3 main points. First of which, what is the DSP and what it really isn't. Then we'll be talking about some tips to reach your goals using the DSP. And this will include a timeline of when you can expect to see results come through. And then lastly, steps to track and measure ROAS, which is return on ad spend, as well as bringing and keeping customers to your product detail pages or PDPs. So at the end of this webinar, we will have a Q&A session. So please feel free to submit any questions that come up now, and we'll answer them at the end via chat. So let me pass it over to Doug, and he'll dive into what is the DSP.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Catherine. So we're going to start this presentation really 101, really basic, just to make sure everybody has an understanding of exactly what the DSP is. So the DSP itself is short for the words demand side platform, which, as you may know or will hopefully learn today, it's a strategic part of an upper funnel advertising strategy. And it helps to really bridge the gap between your upper funnel strategies and your sponsored campaigns, which would be the lowest funnel opportunities available through Amazon ads. So we do this by creating product and brand awareness with advertising to help extend your audience reach. The DSP is really the platform that's built for scale and built for reach and identifying customers all across the internet or on any device they're on. So the platform is also, the DSP also allows advertisers to not only set their bids, it also allows them to purchase ad inventory from multiple exchanges at a single time with the help of programmatic automation. You'll hear the word programmatic quite a bit as it's tied closely with what the DSP is, as it's sort of the backbone of the DSP itself. So the DSP, it provides a unique opportunity to both retarget potential customers on Amazon's PDPs or help drive them to the product detail page from other advertising efforts. We mentioned programmatic ad buying. I want to go into that a little bit so people understand what it is. So programmatic ad buying, it's an automated method of buying digital media. What that means is it ensures advertisers are reaching the right person at the right time in the right place. Programmatic ad buying, it uses data to make decisions on how to buy ads in real time, and the key component there is being real time. This all happens in a microsecond. So now we know what the DSP is, we know what programmatic ad buying is. What does programmatic have to do with the DSP? So programmatic ad buying is the tool that allows the DSP ads to be delivered to users on a variety of devices based on their shopping and browsing behavior at scale in real time. So this means based on your shopping experience, your browsing experience, serving you ads that are relevant to you in real time at scale. The DSP is how that's delivered to the users. And this always helps to make sure that the advertising is relevant to the right consumer, because nobody wants to see an ad that isn't relevant to them. We want to make sure that experience is as good for the user as possible.
Yeah, so I'll take it over with, now that we know what the DSP is, how can it be used to help sellers and brands on Amazon and off Amazon? So let's stop and take for a second how we interact with ads in our everyday lives. So for example, you're on the internet, you read a Forbes article, you'll see a bunch of different video or banner ads. And it's that DSP's job to make sure that the ads are not necessarily annoying you, but they're showing you a relevant ad based off your interests and online shopping or browsing preferences. So it's really bringing the purpose of finding the shopper to make the purchase. So the DSP is one of the upper funnel entry points that helps qualify those users earlier on in their conversion purchase journey and convert them down to the lower funnel. So the DSP isn't used for awareness-based prospecting, or sorry, DSP is used for awareness-based prospecting, remarketing, and then, as I said, identifying those upper funnel users and purchasing them, pushing them down the purchase consideration journey. So by exposing ads to users early on in their consideration journey, there's larger amounts of potential customers that you're qualifying earlier on, as opposed to if they were first approach in your lower funnel efforts like sponsored ads. So with effective strategy and management of the DSP, you're able to utilize the brand messaging across that full funnel to in turn bring in more sales.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Catherine. All right, so now that you better understand the DSP in general and programmatic advertising, you may be asking why choose the Amazon DSP? I'm sure many of you know there's many DSPs out there. Why the Amazon DSP is really the one that we try to champion as much as possible. There's really three components to this, and we're going to go through those here. There's more than just three, but we really want to highlight three that we feel are the ones that have the significant advantage over other DSPs. So the obvious is access to Amazon's exclusive and massive first-party audience capabilities. Everybody's aware of how big Amazon is in the marketplace. We've seen that it represents approximately 40% of the entire US e-commerce market. So we know that they're sitting on an incredibly robust audience set that's available for advertisers. So these audiences allow the DSP to reach customers based on their shopping and browsing behavior in real time based on historical Amazon.com data. And this can be used for retargeting or prospecting strategies that Catherine mentioned earlier. It also gives you one of the earliest points to start tracking the purchase journey. If you're leveraging the Amazon DSP, all of the metrics and all the attributed data starts from the day the impression was first served on whatever platform you're using, whether that's video, whether that's display on a mobile app. So you can really start to measure that journey, whether they purchase a specific product or not. And only Amazon gives you that insight into their platform and purchases. You can also bring your own data from your own CRM and overlay it with Amazon's first-party data to create high-quality, more niche, more targeted audiences so that you can then serve ads to through the DSP. So that's the first key component of the DSP. Another one is really, again, another obvious, it's the inventory. So with using the Amazon DSP, you have exclusive access to serve impressions on inventory from sites and apps that Amazon owns and operates. This includes Amazon.com, that's the primary one, but not to be forgotten are their mobile shopping app, imdb.com, Fire TV, and Twitch, and that's just to name a few. They're continually enabling more and more of their owned and operated properties for advertising. The Amazon DSP, it reaches consumers across various platforms, not only against all the sites that they own, but also on desktop, mobile, streaming TV. It's designed specifically to send users and to keep users on Amazon.com through these various inventory types. So the final reason I'll discuss today is the creative opportunities. Amazon has what's called a dynamic or responsive e-commerce display and video creative. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but basically what that does is it allows the user to access the things like Amazon imagery. So you're permitted to use items such as the Prime eligibility logo, the star rating, call to actions that are stock aware. So if your item's out of stock, it won't promote that item, or it will say something like learn more instead of buy now. You can also pull information from the PDP dynamically, including things like up-to-date pricing, any promotion, review scores, product image, promotional badges, such as a Prime Day badge if your ad is eligible. All you need is an ASIN, and the creative will be built automatically based on real-time information directly from the PDP.
Awesome. So now turning back to the DSP in general, we know what the DSP is, but let's talk about what the DSP isn't. So for one, the DSP is not a short-term solution. The DSP is a platform that really needs time to mature and nurture that customer as they eventually make a purchase. Needs time to develop, and we'll normally see within the first 90 days indicators of performance. But keep in mind, it may take a little bit longer than anticipated, as all results are directional and should in turn help inform your optimizations and additional strategies. And then the second thing, the DSP should not be your only advertising tool. So it should not be used in isolation, in other words. It should be used as a tool to help drive traffic to those product detail pages or your brand store, and then in turn, generate awareness of your products. So it depends on the consideration journey, and we're competing with the competition who are reaching customers early on. This needs to be done in conjunction with other strategies, such as sponsored ads, not in isolation. All right, Doug.
So Catherine, you mentioned sponsored ads, which I think is a big conversation right now between what sponsored ads is and what the DSP is. So it's important to note that the DSP is absolutely not the same as sponsored ads. Even though they share a lot of similarities, they are not the same thing. DSP is definitely not PPC. That is a very, very fine line between the two different platforms. So we always call the DSP the proactive solution, and sponsored ads is reactive. They both serve a purpose. They both work together. We want to kind of provide you with a real world example about how that works together. So we always compare the DSP to the billboard that a customer would see from their car as they're driving to the store. And sponsored ads is the ad you're going to see in the aisle itself. right? So we want to make sure that as you're heading to the store, the customer is thinking about your product, so that by the time they're finally ready to purchase, sponsored ads is kind of continually pushing them towards considering your product over another. So in order for this to work, that billboard ad on the highway has to be as relevant to the user as possible. We're not necessarily concerned with where that billboard is located, as long as it's on the way to the store. But we want to make sure that we're serving that billboard to the right user. So this is something that sponsored is unable to do, because sponsored is much more reactive. You typically have to trigger an action, and then that will result in an ad. Whereas with the DSP, an action you performed in the past is what generates an impression today. So we're going to have an additional webinar or a blog post on this in the future, because this is a topic all by itself that we want to really dive into and give everybody a good understanding of what this means in practice. But before we move on, just a quick note about the differences between the platforms beyond what I just mentioned about the reactive and proactive elements, is that the pricing model. So the DSP uses a CPM model, and if people aren't familiar with that, it means you're paying for impressions served, regardless of whether a user clicked on the ad or performed an action like visited the product detail page. Sponsored ads are a pay-per-click model. So sponsored would be much more of a performance-based option, whereas DSP is much more a awareness and reach tool, because again, you're paying for impressions at scale. And because you're paying for those impressions, there's much more inventory available to users who are willing to pay for impressions and not have to worry about performance to get revenue like they do with sponsored ads. So you'll see a lot more publishers out there opening their inventory to CPMs and not clicks, because CPMs, again, like I mentioned, you're paying for whether the user clicked on the ad or not. So the incentive on the publisher is much more in favor of DSP with CPMs.
Great. So hopefully by now we've answered your questions and you have an understanding of what the DSP is and isn't. So you're ready to get started with the process of launching a campaign. So what does that look like? Doug and I like to set up a pre-launch call with clients to understand advertising goals. We will then create and tailor a media plan that will achieve said goals. The process is pretty simple from there. You'll just provide us with the necessary information, such as creative assets, ASINs, brand logo, etc., other things included. And then pending client approval on the proposed media plan, campaigns can go live within 24 to 48 hours. This does depend on any creative ad policy rejections that we may come across or custom audience creation issues. But with that being said, when you work with our team at Feedvisor, we will hold your hand through the entire process to make sure that you're comfortable with us managing your DSP strategies, and then that we can help you resolve any campaign issues and help you avoid them happening in the first place.
Right.
Doug.
So thanks, Catherine. So we're continuing down this journey. So now you know what the DSP is, you know what it isn't. Hopefully at this point you've spoken with us and we're about to execute your campaigns. Now you're probably wondering about results. Catherine briefly mentioned earlier that the DSP is not a short-term solution. Anybody looking for a quick return, the DSP is not the plan. The DSP needs time to nurture and mature and qualify the users, which does take a little bit of time, but the results are typically a gain in overall performance after the long-term period has ran. We typically expect early indicators of performance around 90 days on whether or not the DSP is showing any sort of indications that it's going to be working against your goals. I do want to dive a little bit into goals. So we obviously hear clients with all different types of reasons of why they want to use the DSP, or can the DSP help based on what they're trying to accomplish. So I want to just go through a few of the common ones we hear, and just a little bit of the different things that the DSP can help move the needle forward, some more than others. Again, the more lower funnel efforts is not the DSP strong point, but the more mid to upper is where it really shines. So we're talking about one of the strategies we always hear about is improving total sales, right? So you're looking at total sales across your entire catalog. The DSP helps because, again, you're qualifying users earlier on. You're not just having users come back to the product after they purchased in the past. You're really trying to focus on lifting overall total sales by reaching users much earlier in the consideration phase. While the DSP is not ideal for the low funnel solutions, that's really where platforms like Sponsored does. It could perform a bit of a mid to low funnel by using retargeting efforts to really focus on performance and ROAS. You're a bit limited in that as you're identifying users who've been to your pages, but there is scale there with the DSP to retarget users to drive them to purchase your product. So along with that is a bit more of a prospecting tactic, which is driving traffic to the product detail page from users who've come from other sites outside of Amazon. People who are not on Amazon are highly valuable. As people on Amazon are already bombarded by advertising, we want to try to find users outside of that space, similar to the billboard we mentioned. That's where we want to drive that traffic to the product detail page from non-Amazon sites. We also want to focus on new to brand customers. Because the DSP is proactive, we have the opportunity to focus on users who haven't been to your page or haven't purchased a product from you in the past year. This is where we really can strive by competing with the other companies in the space much earlier on to create the mindset for your product over another. Another one's going to be building brand loyalty. We can always retarget users who've purchased products from your brand over the past year because we want to make sure they consider your product and not the competitors. And then the DSP, we kind of saved this one for last, but it's really the strongest point of the DSP is creating a reach and awareness to help build your brand name recognition, right? The DSP is able to hit millions and millions of users at scale. Typically, delivery is not too much of an issue in the DSP space just because the audience sizes are so large. So we can really reach users who maybe don't have familiarity with your product or your brand, but have expressed interest in the category or exposed some sort of lifestyle that we think they'd be a good fit for your product. So these are just some of the few goals that are possible to achieve, but it's important to know that they're all based on several different types of criteria. A few of those are the available budget, the audience sizes, if we're doing retargeting and custom audiences, the competitive landscape, and that's just to name a few. There's a significantly larger amount of criteria that we take into account whenever we're building a strategy for clients.
Great. So adding on to that, the overall goals that Doug just discussed, let's talk about what metrics you should track on the DSP for each tactic in order to measure success within those campaigns. So the following examples are all strategies that we leverage that utilize that Amazon machine learning algorithm to optimize towards the metric listed in real time. So the first one is retargeting efforts, which can be product or brand retargeting, bringing to your Amazon storefront or the product detail page. So retargeting users that visited the Amazon PDP or your website, and we measure success on these tactics by looking at the traffic to the PDP measured in detail page view rate and ROAS, return on ad spend. And then prospecting efforts, which is our other one. It's customers currently in market for the category that your product falls under, which could be a competitive product or your own. But this also will be measured by driving traffic to the PDP. So again, looking at detailed page view rate, and then also tracking the new to brand purchases. So increasing that new to brand users that haven't interacted with your brand or purchased before. So to demonstrate our ability to hit a client's goals, we are including a case study that we did with one of our clients that shows a success story of where performance was not necessarily meeting expectations. And we quickly, as a team, adapted and optimized into new strategies that were then given time to develop and measured performance. So in this slide, you'll see that ClearPath Paper was looking to increase awareness, drive repeat purchases, and utilize a full funnel advertising approach with the DSP. So they started with a monthly budget of $5K, but within the first month, we weren't necessarily seeing the results that they were hoping for. So requested that they cut their DSP spend in half. So with that minimal budget, we were still able to work with what we had and really optimize and shift our strategy, which in turn resulted in ROAS increasing 4 times. We increased the DSP attributed sales by 116% and increased the percentage of new to brand customers for that brand by 45%. So really just demonstrating here our ability to take with what you have and make it work for you to optimize that strategy. And we'll be sharing this full case study in our follow-up email after the webinar has concluded.
And actually, I just want to kind of mention one more thing on the case study that I think is important to note is that there was a lot of cooperation with the client, continually being transparent with them on performance, having them understand our tactics all along the way, and making sure that the pivot that Catherine mentioned happened in collaboration with the client, with their agreement, with their understanding, to make sure that you know, they were part of the entire process, but they knew that we were driving the decisions and making the recommendations and explaining to them as they go. So I think that's also something just very key that we want to make sure we highlight, is that we do pivot on a dime as long as we feel confident in the data, and we work closely with the clients to make sure that those changes are effective. And if not, again, pivot again. But in this time, it was one pivot, and performance was very strong, and they returned back to their original investment budget.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Doug.
All right, as we're wrapping up, I just want to kind of summarize a bit here about how you know, me and Catherine work with the clients. So we work based on all of our experience and our expertise to operate a bit like an agency in this case. So one of the things we always try to do is we want to make sure to optimize your marketing strategy. I know it says it on the screen, but there's no better way to put it. We absolutely want to focus on making sure that your entire marketing plan is benefited from the DSP. So based on our historical data, our best practices, our playbooks, we always make sure that we're executing all based on that, along with your own individual goals. And as I mentioned, we're going to take historical data, historical best practices to drive the performance and make sure that we're hitting your goal, or pivoting if we're not, and measuring those optimizations to make sure that the pivot performed well. So we can help you manage your campaigns and your promotions to drive traffic to your brand store, as we mentioned, or to the product detail page, to generate awareness, incremental sales, and focus on new to brand customers. If you liked our webinar, please feel free to take a screenshot of this page or share your thoughts on the DSP on any social media platform. Make sure you tag Feedvisor for a chance to get a free advertising audit from our team.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug and Catherine. It was so fun to hear you talk a little bit about DSP. We had some questions come through. We've already answered a few in the chat, but we've saved a few to read through live here. So without further ado, let's dive into a few of the questions. Doug, I'll start off with the first question with you. And that is, if selling on Amazon isn't my only goal, is DSP still a good thing to include in my advertising strategy?
Great question, and we get that a lot. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the DSP, it's about finding the right person for the product, whether that's on Amazon or not. I think it is critical to note that you're able to drive traffic to your page, to Amazon's page. You know, the landing page is kind of up for grabs. Some of the options are a bit more restricted and limited if you're running on your own page, serving ads through the Amazon DSP. But there's, you know, things like you can't run certain creatives, you can't run certain audiences, you can't run certain inventory, but there are still ways to leverage Amazon. And what's great is if you're an Amazon seller and you're actually selling on your own site, you can still track purchases on Amazon as well as your own to see where those purchases are actually being made. So like I said, it's a great strategy to include even if Amazon's not your only goal, because Amazon is still such a large player. We can always make sure we're tracking purchases to see how your non-Amazon efforts are working against the Amazon platform. And again, like I mentioned, there's restrictions, but if we work with you, we'll explain to you what those are. You know, similar to if your landing page is seen as a competitor to the Amazon.com site, there are certain things you can't do. But we work closely with the clients to make sure they understand exactly what they can and cannot do. In that case, it's obviously a bit of a unique scenario, but we work with our clients to make sure they understand.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. That's super helpful to know. Another question that came in, I'm going to hand this one over to you, Catherine. Why would I begin using DSP if sponsored display is working well as an advertising strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question and something that we get a lot. And I believe in further we'll be educating on kind of the differences, as there are a bunch of overlaps between sponsored display and DSP. But to answer the question, DSP is just a more robust option. So if you want scale and more optimization and customizing, with things such as adjusting the recency window. DSP has more advanced audience targeting, where you can ultimately like fine tune your audiences to meet those niche audiences that you're looking for. And then the DSP also has more options to upper funnel inventory, like private marketplaces, audio ads, video offerings that sponsored display does not. So yeah, to answer your question in turn, it's just a more robust option for clients to use.
Yeah, and kind of echoing that, we've actually, Catherine and myself have spent a lot of time documenting the differences between the platforms because there's a lot of gray area between sponsored and DSP, specifically with sponsored display. But we have a lot of collateral that we continually update as they enhance sponsored display to continue showing what the difference is between the platforms, because it's as confusing for the client as it is for us. So we make sure that we have that as organized as possible.
And I believe we might be having some future content on that as well. So that's a great segue for that as well. It looks like we have time for about 2 more questions. So Doug, I'll start this one off with you again. What DSP tactic is the most popular, retargeting or driving awareness? And should they always be used together?
I mean, all of the above, right? You know, I don't think it's a one size fits all in any situation. You know, the DSP is a very fluid platform. You know, sponsored is kind of a lot more set in stone, but the DSP is a very creative, flexible, fluid platform. So retargeting and prospecting both have their place in any upper funnel media plan. So it really depends on the goal. If your goal is new to brand, we're going to want to focus on prospecting, but that's upper funnel. We'd be ignoring retargeting as a lower funnel. That's a silly thing to do. We want to make sure we cover the entire funnel, not just a piece of it. As Catherine mentioned earlier, DSP should never be used in isolation. Strategies within the DSP should not be used in isolation as well. Anywhere there's a gap is an opportunity for a client to come in and introduce their own ad and conquest that customer. So, you know, we want to make sure that you have a healthy mix of both. And that you're not just focusing on your retargeting audience, because retargeting is going to be people who've been to your page. That's always going to be a smaller audience than Amazon's in-market and lifestyle audiences, which is huge. So you're ignoring that upper funnel. So again, by including both, you're hitting people who've been to your page, people who haven't been to your page. One of the things we do is we make sure that the prospecting is only focusing on people who haven't been to your page, and retargeting is focusing on people who have. So we kind of have everything covered. We try to keep things as clean as possible. And at the end of the day, we think they work together in tandem.
Yeah, and just adding to that, that's why Doug and I really like to hop on a call with clients pre-launch so that we can understand their goals and really create something that, like Doug said, it's not one size fits all. So we have the freedom to kind of tailor that to fit your goals exactly.
Great, thank you too. We'll do the last question before I share what that is. We'll keep on answering questions in the chat too. So if these are prompting more questions, please send them in the chat. Keep on sending them in the chat. We will answer them. If we don't answer them, we'll have some more content coming up that may just be inspired by your questions as well. So the last question here, Catherine, I'll start with you, and Doug, feel free to add in. What is the biggest pro of using Amazon DSP? We have this whole webinar talking about all the things that DSP can do. If you had to choose one thing to convince someone why they should ultimately start using DSP, what would that be?
Right, so simple answer is Amazon is the world's biggest e-commerce site. So just being there and having a leg up, you're able to compete with your competition on and off Amazon. So while other platforms like sponsored ads allow you to do that, again, it's that customization of what the Amazon DSP has to offer that really allows you to scale and again, be on the world's largest e-commerce platform.
Absolutely, yeah. It's you know, the crowd is there, so we need to make sure we're where the crowd is, whether that's their audiences or their inventory. You know, you have to go where the action is, and right now the action continues to be at Amazon, and I don't see that changing anytime in the near future. So we have a you know, steady foot in the Amazon advertising ecosystem.
Awesome. That was all the time we have for questions. But before everyone starts leaving, we have a short survey we're going to ask everyone to fill out, talking a little bit about how you felt about this webinar, ideas for a future webinar, content that you want us to talk about here at Feedvisor. And then remember that we'll be doing a follow-up email that will include the recording of this webinar, as well as future insights and invites into a deep dive into topics like Amazon's audience capabilities, creative options, and different types of goals that DSP includes, as well as many more pieces of content that we may have found from your questions here during this webinar. So hold tight and fill out that survey. Anything else we would like to add at the end, Doug or Catherine?
I don't have anything. It was a pleasure to be here today and talk about all things DSP. So looking forward to the future topics.
Yeah, I think hopefully this educated a lot of people on the DSP. It's, you know, when we get on calls with clients, we always go on and on and on for hours about this. It's you know, we're pretty passionate about it. It does take a little bit of a conversation to kind of explain a bit about what the DSP does. You know, today is just a starting point. Hopefully we can connect with some more people to kind of get, you know, dive deeper into these questions. We have open door policies. We're happy to speak with anybody and really just educate them on the DSP. We feel it's a pretty critical component that oftentimes is more confusing than helpful. So we're hoping to clear the air and really, you know, use our experience to help build the best campaigns for our clients as possible.
Thank you so much, you two. And to our audience, don't forget to post on social and potentially receive a free advertising audit. This is an awesome thing that we are offering. And you can find us at feedvisor.com on all social media sites. Fill out that survey, and thank you so much for joining us and our DSP experts, Doug and Catherine.
Thank you.